Okay, everybody, thank you for coming. It should be assumed that the Zoom link that I sent out is the same. It's my private meeting room. It's my Zoom room. So just assume Thursdays, 2 p.m., log into the Zoom session, and class is going to be starting. Okay. Uh, if we're meeting in person, I will give you a full week's heads up, and I will also notify you in advance. I have not sent out the SimNet links as of yet because I'm making adjustments to the classwork on the SimNet, trying to make things a little more streamlined for you guys. But for now, continue to work on your week 3. You should be completed with your week 2 assignments. You should be on your week 3 assignments. So we're going to start just admitting more students coming to the class. Okay, so this lecture is about global markets. And I think that this is probably one of the more important lectures because we sometimes aren't really familiar with or understanding how business is tied to everything around us beyond us. So, for example, when you buy bananas from the supermarket, obviously you may not realize those bananas probably didn't grow here in the US. But then you also might not realize or understand how all of that is coming into fruition. So, for example, are you guys familiar with the clothing store Banana Republic? And the word Banana Republic is actually a terminology that has nothing to do with clothing. It has to do with the banana industry. So I always say this each class, and I use this as an example. If you go into a supermarket, go to any supermarket, and you look at the produce, apples, strawberries, blueberries, bananas, so on and so forth, you're going to see that bananas are one of the cheapest or least expensive fruit you can buy per pound. You might buy apples $1.29 a pound, $2 a pound. Strawberries, you get a carton of strawberries, 4, 5, 6, depending if it's organic or whatever, $5, $6 a pound. Bananas are a couple of cents, 30 cents, 40 cents. Organic bananas are like 50 cents. So why is it that bananas are so cheap? Is it easy to grow? Is there something about bananas that's just cheaper to produce? And a lot of that has to do with the global markets, how trade is facilitated between different countries to reduce price, increase profits, so on and so forth. And I will continue the story in a bit, right? So this slide is letting you know that the world population is huge. So there's a lot of global markets expand beyond ourselves. And I'm just going to bring up this map, not so much to focus on the population distribution, but to actually kind of further the story I was explaining. Uh, there's something called tax subsidies. Tax subsidies are subsidies that the government gives. Subsidies means money that the government gives to small businesses or large scale businesses because they themselves are engaging or doing a certain behavior or process that is favorable as far as the government is concerned. So, for example, sugarcane growers, banana growers, big oil, they receive tax subsidies. That means that when you pay your taxes, or your parents pay your taxes, or if you're working, you pay taxes, part of your tax dollars go to pay or subsidize the cost of certain industries. That means when you buy a package of sugar, or you buy bananas, or you buy oil at the pump for your car, or whatever, The price you're paying is not the real price of the product. That price you're paying, the government artificially reduces the price of that product by giving money to those industries, giving money to those businesses so they can artificially lower the price of the product to make it cheaper for you, but not really for you. So when you go to buy a cup of sugar, when you buy a bag of sugar, it's fairly inexpensive. They get subsidies so that your tax dollars are used to give these companies free money. And when they get the money, they have to agree to lower the price of their product to whomever, to the market. The reason why they do this is because you see this big map here? You see Asia's 60% of the world population, right? America, all these countries, they compete on the global market, right? You could buy, why not buy, sugar from Asia? Why don't you buy bananas from South America? Why don't you buy bananas from the South Pacific, which is not, it's actually more like over here, but it's technically over here, the South Pacific. Why are you buying bananas from Chiquita, right? And obviously they grow those bananas in tropical climates. But the thing is, though, is that when it comes to doing global business, it's tricky because you're competing with not just local companies, but entire countries. In some cases, you're competing with entire governments. So the reason why the US government subsidizes your tax dollars to artificially reduce the cost of certain products is so that when they sell those products overseas, these different countries, these countries cannot compete financially to beat the cost of the American good produced. So when you buy bananas, it's so cheap to buy bananas. That's not the real cost of the banana. That's a subsidized cost the government's paying to reduce the cost of the banana. So it's cheaper for you, which is good. But then if you go into the actual countries where they grow the bananas, so the actual physical country where they grow the bananas, wouldn't they just be able to just beat an American country or Chiquita banana out? Hey, this is our land, my grandfather's land, my parents' land. I'll just grow bananas and compete with you, right? This is my land. You're in my country growing bananas on our country's land. I'm just going to grow bananas and compete with you and beat you. You can't. Because when you start growing your bananas as a local grower, those bananas are more expensive to grow, not because you have a lack of ability, but because when you finally figure out how to grow those bananas, bring them to market, sell them, all that stuff, the American tax subsidy is artificially bringing down the price of Chiquita banana such that other local competitors can't beat them. So it allows Chiquita banana to stay in those countries, dominate those industries, and prevent other competitors from beating them by using your tax dollars or our tax dollars to decrease the price artificially so they gain and control global market share. They do that with oil. They do that with many different products. And other countries do the same thing. So you'll see, if you read this chapter or reviewed it, you'll see this thing of taxes and tariffs, import tax, export tax. All those taxes play a role in trying to control, mitigate, or offset this type of behavior between countries competing and trading globally. So, for example, if you go to Japan, right, you eat Japanese rice. If you go to Japan and you eat rice in Japan, it was grown in Japan. The rice in Japan is not grown anywhere else except in Japan. So what if Uncle Ben's California rice wanted to sell to the Japanese market? It would make sense, right? Japanese market, huge Asian market. Everyone eats rice. We should go and sell our product in Japan, right? Japan says no. So Japan puts a tax, an import tax, on all foreign rice coming in outside the US. at such a crazy high price that it's not financially feasible for any Japanese person to buy any other rice except rice that's grown in Japan. Japan does this to defend and protect their agricultural industry of rice farming. So they do this sometimes. Countries will defend themselves from outside countries trying to take control of their market or disrupt their market by putting import tax. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it depends, right? Because if you need cars or you need electronics or you need something that Japan can't grow, Japan doesn't want to put a big tax on it because then you're not going to want to sell there, right? But Japan says we don't want you selling your rice here. So Japan has a very strict or strong taxes against, or you could say tariffs against bringing in outside rice because they want to control and maintain their own rice industry. And they don't want their farmers and their agriculture rice industry being disrupted by outside participants. So you'll see that, sometimes it's healthy. You see, we buy Japanese cars in America, right? If America wanted to, they could put a big tax on Japanese cars. And you wouldn't buy Japanese cars because they'd be too expensive. But America usually isn't like that. Right? America isn't about import export. America is purely free market. Everything comes, everything goes, everything's for sale. So everything is open and available in the market in America. So you'll see that the industry isn't necessarily a protected industry in America. America is everything wheels and deals and goes and is available. But you'll see in other countries sometimes that's not the case. And likewise, certain countries depend on each other, right? Russia, India have very close agricultural relationships where they trade and exchange certain types of foods or agricultural goods because their climates are different. So they depend upon each other for trade. So similarly, because of America's practices, America might just subsidize a product and just come in and dominate your entire country, your entire industry. And then what are you supposed to do? Now you can't compete with America's bananas or their sugar because they've chosen to dominate the industry because your tax dollars are helping to subsidize or artificially reduce the price. So one of the defense mechanisms countries can do is to put import tax on there. So when you're thinking about global industry, it's very complicated. It's complicated because every country has its own needs, its own industry strengths and weaknesses. And you're trying to play with other countries, trade with other countries, sell your stuff, but you also don't want to get taken over necessarily economically. You don't want them to destroy your industries, control your industries, possess your industries. So you'll find that there's a lot of this import, export, tariffs and duties and taxes and things and restrictions to try to maintain and defend the relationship between one country to another. And obviously, some countries don't have the best relationship with one another. So you see the word free trade here. This is a definition you should know. It's the movement of goods and services among nations without political or economic barriers. America tries to support free trade as far as how it does business, but obviously America is not always in the best terms with certain countries, like Russia, for example. So sometimes you'll see trade has its restrictions based upon countries. So America has a lot of restrictions with Russia, but India doesn't, and neither does China. So these relationships that countries have with each other also affects how things get moved around, right? So America buys stuff from China all the time. China buys stuff from America all the time, but America is not necessarily getting stuff from Russia. Not that you can't buy things from Russia. You can import stuff from Russia, obviously. A lot of Russian goods come here and back and forth, but it depends on what's being traded, right? So you'll see these concepts in terms of trade, in terms of what a country is looking to do in terms of establishing and strengthening itself economically. So these are just basic pros and cons in terms of trade. And I'm not going to get into it because we just sort of went over a very deep example. But these are the definitions you should be knowing. Well, as far as exams are concerned, comparative advantage, absolute advantage. So comparative advantage, a country should sell to other countries the products that it produces most efficiently and buy from other countries those products it cannot produce as effectively efficient. And that's a pretty simple concept. If you're good at making something, you want to sell it to countries that can't or don't. And if you aren't so good at doing something or don't have certain resources available, you want to import those items available. Versus absolute advantage, a country has a monopoly on producing a specific product or is able to produce it more efficient in all the countries. So I gave the example of bananas. America doesn't produce bananas in America. Maybe in Miami, Florida, not Miami, excuse me, just Florida, not specific to Miami, but the southern tip of Florida is warm. So you do have fruit manufacturers and growers that grow fruit um, in Florida. But a lot of the major fruit production is done outside the U.S. But it's U.S. owned, U.S. controlled companies that are doing the growing. So in this example, the example I gave earlier, they have an absolute advantage. They're literally going to other countries and dominating monopolies, and they're using tax subsidies to control the pricing such that they have these lockdowns. So why the country's submissive or complicit to it? And the reason why, you wonder, well, why are they letting these Americans come in and do this? And it's because it provides jobs, right? So these corporations, they come in, they produce factories. The factories provide jobs into industries that the locals don't have access to. So maybe more rural areas where the job is going to pay you more than what you could make on your own. The other reality is politics. America, a lot. If you look at the stories behind what I'm telling you, there's a lot of politics and control behind how America was able to position itself to do these things, gain these monopolies, money exchanging in hands of people that didn't have the best interest of the company, but didn't have the best interest of their country, but the best interest of themselves. The usual stuff. But absolute advantage is a pretty good example of the Chiquita banana situation I explained. And comparative advantage is sort of similar to what most countries are trying to do, is really niche out a comparative advantage. So importing means bringing goods into your home country. Exporting means sending goods out of your country. So if you are importing goods in, so if I'm buying a Toyota car or a Hyundai or Hyundai, if that's actually how they're going to pronounce it, depends on the country. You're bringing that good in, right? If I'm buying a Daimler Chrysler or a German-made automobile, it's importing, it's coming in, right? If I'm selling Ford, which is a U.S.-made car, and I'm selling it abroad, that's exporting. So understanding the terminology. Import means stuff comes in. Export means stuff goes out. So from Japan's perspective, they don't want Uncle Ben's rice. They don't want that being imported into their country. But they do want to sell their rice, so they're going to export their rice out of their country. So the import-export is from the perspective of the country, right? So if you're in the U.S., importing means you're bringing things into your country. Exporting means you're bringing things out. So then the question is Chiquita banana, which is being grown, let's say in Mexico or somewhere in the Caribbean, is that being imported in? Because realistically, it's an American company, right? So how does that work? If an American company has arms or industries abroad, and then they bring that product in. So it's just like Apple. Apple, all that manufacturing happens in China, and the microchips are made the semiconductor units are made in Taiwan. and they've customized semiconductor. It's called fabless, uh, fabless, fabricationless semiconductor manufacturing. That means that Apple designs microchips, but it's actually physically built at a semiconductor foundry in Taiwan. It's one of the few or only semiconductor microchip manufacturers in the world that can do uh, nano by the nanometer microchips. So realistically, Apple is a global company. They're buying, manufacturing, and getting supplies from all over the world, right? They're going to Africa. They're getting raw cobalt and different things from Africa, minerals to make those chips, to make those processors. But it's an American company and it's an American good that's being made in China. So is that an import or is that an export? So it can get a little confusing. So sourcing your goods, right? So you may be importing raw materials, all right, to then export a finished good or service. So I may be going to Taiwan and I may be importing Taiwanese semiconductors, which they're manufacturing for me. Then I may be going to China and saying, China, build me an Apple computer. Right? Then I have a finished product, which is an American computer phone, which I'm then exporting back out to different countries. Okay. So it's a little tricky to understand, but for the most part, the import of a finished good or the export of a finished good or service pertains to something importing, meaning bringing something into the country, exporting, meaning bringing something out of the country. So for our class lecture, export is going to mean that you are selling, like in the example of the Apple I gave, the Apple iPhone I gave, you are exporting, Apple is exporting their phones because the finished product is an American good. So they're exporting it out of the US to different markets. Okay. Samsung, if you're buying a Samsung phone, not an American phone, right? Now, Samsung does have American divisions, American corporations, an American arm. They can do business in America. So then it's confusing. So what if a Korean company comes into the US, hires American employees, does business in America, pays American taxes, manufactures on American soil, sells to the American public? Is it an import or an export? Right? So it's a little confusing. It's not confusing, but it's confusing when you think about how deep it can get. But for the sake of the exam, whatever country you're in, import means stuff is coming in from another country. Export means you're selling to other countries. That's all you need to know, right? I just want to kind of go over the complexity of all this. It's very complex. Okay. So surplus and deficit means that the economy of the country, when they are exporting, so trade surplus, we're talking about trade surplus, the company exports more than what it imports. That means that it's manufacturing and selling more things than what it brings into the country. And a deficit is when the country needs to bring more things in than what it sells. That means a country that's in a trade deficit requires more assistance to bring stuff in. I give you like Dubai, right? Dubai, what are they producing? Oil? What are they manufacturing? What are they importing? So are they selling more of one thing versus what they're bringing in? And that sort of tells you if their trade surplus is favorable or if they have a deficit unfavorable, because they're selling more than what they're bringing in, or they're bringing in more than what they're selling. So dumping is literally sort of the example I made with the bananas. You can go into another country, sell stuff really cheap, just wreck their market, and you can take control of it. Okay. Balance of payments. has to do with the difference between money coming in and coming out between exports and imports. I'm going to go over this little thing here, right? So this is just sort of the complexities of what you need to reach global markets. Licensing, exporting, franchising. For the sake of our class, I'm not going to ask you to really understand this too much in detail, but you should understand that these are different strategies for reaching global markets. Maybe I do a joint venture with a foreign company or strategic alliance to do business in that country. So now they go over each definition. What licensing is, I'm going to glaze on this quickly. Exporting, Export Assistance Center. This is important because you might want to start a business and sell your product overseas. You have no idea how to do that. So you can look at export assistance centers where they help support your ability to sell abroad. America has a lot of EACs and ETCs to help you break into China, Latin America, whatever country you want to sell in. Japan, if you have a product that you think, I think this country would really like my product, they'll help you. Okay, so this is very important from a practical standpoint. Franchising, you could see McDonald's in Japan, the McDonald's is in India. You see franchising, they're all over the place. Contract manufacturing, that's what Apple does, right? They have companies in China that are manufacturing Apple products, American Apple-made products, but it's being made in China. China is one of the biggest contract manufacturers there are. And joint ventures is we have two companies form a partnership to work together to achieve a goal. And strategic alliances where they're not necessarily joining together as one company, but they may be working together strategically, even though they're two separate companies. So FDI means whether or not a foreign nation or company is actually buying property or business in other nations. Like if I wanted to buy real estate in China as an American citizen, I could do that. It's called a foreign direct investment. You have Chinese nationals, Chinese businessmen and women buying American property, buying American businesses. It's called foreign direct investment. Now we talked a little bit on subsidies. So a foreign subsidiary is a company owned in a foreign country by another company. Chiquita Banana, right? So you see it's a lot of wheeling dealing with all this global stuff, global markets. Multinational company. McDonald's is a multinational company. It's all over the place. Burger King. You see their brand everywhere globally. Not all large global businesses are multinational. That's true, right? So that means that they really are multinational because they own and businesses in those countries. They're a part of the country. Multinational stock ownership and multinational management are key characteristics that separate it from just a company that's doing business overseas versus it is actually multinational. That's important to understand. Especially with franchises, you need to be multinational for franchisees to own overseas. So sovereign wealth funds pertain to funds controlled by the government. And I'm not going to get too much into this, but just remember the definition of sociocultural forces, ethnocentricity, what those definitions mean, because you're literally just looking to kind of regurgitate those definitions on your exam. The exchange rates pertain to the difference in value between one currency to a next. How much is my US dollar buying in pesos? How much is the pesos buying in Canadian dollars? It's that rate of exchange. That's what that definition ties to. So because of that, value currency can lose value or increase in value because of the exchanges. Obviously, there's different legal and regulatory forces as well. I want to get into, let's see, right here. So one of the things to understand is that global trade, it's booming, right? So if you're anyone sitting in this class is thinking about being an entrepreneur or a business person, you're considering, hey, I'd like to start a business, grow a business, or you become more engaged in business, it's important to think globally. You can create an app. Your app could be in the US, it could be in China. Look, TikTok. TikTok's a Chinese company. You're buying products from other countries. The world is smaller than ever. And because of that, it's much easier now to do and engage in global trade, global investment. You could buy stocks in another country, another business from another country. They're called FDR. I think they're called FDRs. I think they're called. So the reality of all this being here now, your stuff could be made. You could have T-shirts made in China today and have that stuff shipped here. So keep in mind about how global trade has dominated how we are, who we are, but also the reality that's affecting our position as we move forward. So class, we'll meet each other again next week, Thursday, same time, and I'll post this lecture up. Everyone have a good evening or have a good afternoon.
Thank you.